Greetings and hello, everyone. My name is Elmani S. Viney, and welcome to Empowering the BE Future Modern Man. And I will be your facilitator for today. And we have some amazing guests as we talk about the power of mentoring. We have Brother Brandon Frame of the Black Man Can. We have Brother Robert Corion of DELL, and as well as Brother Brandon Webb of Amazon. And so we're not going to hold back today, and we're going to get into a deep conversation about the power of mentoring. And during this time, we want you to think long about what is the value of mentoring and what is the future of it, and how can we utilize it to push forth a new generation of highly achieving Black men. So I want to actually ask all you brothers, and Brother Brandon Frame, I want to start with you. How can we change the narrative of mentoring young Black males so that it moves from this deficit narrative where we're only looking at what we're trying to prevent young men from becoming or doing, to a narrative where it's about advancement and seeing the best of them? So Brother Frame, I want to start with you, then Brother Corion to you, and then Brother Webb to you.
I love that question. It's a constant thing I think about. One quick story is because I feel like me growing up, I didn't have access to the programs because I was just somebody who went to school and just did the right thing, right? So when I think about what you're saying, we have to move. Right now, we see mentoring programs a lot of times from a tier 2 or tier 3, where it's targeted or it's tertiary, right? So you have to show a risk factor in order to gain access to the program, where we need to move to seeing mentoring programs at a universal level. This is a program, and all Black males in a particular school or an environment have access to the program. You don't have to gain access because you display a risk factor. You are a part of the program because we are trying to look at your strengths, and we want to harness those strengths. Even a student who is at a tier 2 or a tier 3 that's in it has lots of strengths, but our program is focused on looking at the strengths of our young men and then continuing to harness those over time, as opposed to thinking about it as a targeted support for young men, as opposed to, again, that universal. This is for all young men because they all need these skills. They all need the opportunity. They all need to meet all of us so they can move forward.
I agree. Thank you so much for that. Brother Corion, to you.
I think conversations like this and conversations within our own circle of friends and family are absolutely necessary. These conversations are what enables us to have and share our experiences, as Brother Brandon just described. We have to be able to share the benefits that each of us are unique and different, but we're also a correlation of that struggles, and we've been struggling to overcome our past wrongs. So I think it's also very important that we develop a better version of ourselves, and that occurs through mentoring. We need to be able to sustain good relationships, create a good career path for all Black youth, not just ones that are at risk. So all of these sort of things, including things like being empathetic, enables us to develop a good correlation of Black men at risk and the ones that are not at risk. All of these occur through these kind of conversations that we have within our family, friends, and our circles. I think that's really where it happens.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brother Corion, for that. And then Brother Webb, what about yourself?
Well, I'll tell you, both of these brothers, they hit points that I would hit. I'll say, growing up, I was not an at-risk, quote unquote, at-risk youth. But at the end of the day, when it comes to mentorship, the purpose of mentorship is preparing and arming the next generation to thrive and equipping them with the skill sets to lead and succeed. When I look at this, it is a village that we are raising, and it takes us fully educating that village and preparing this generation to assume the mantle and take on roles and responsibilities that our generation has inherited. So when you're looking across the board and preparing the next generation, look, everyone stands to gain from a mentor. Again, I cannot emphasize enough. I wasn't somebody that was quote unquote at risk, but I had great mentors who were put in my path, who recognized the skills that I had and armed me with a little bit more so that I could be helpful and an aid to those that weren't as fortunate as I am, but also exposed me to individuals that didn't have the blessings that I had in my life. And there are many lessons that I learned from them. So when you look at the comprehensive village that we're building, mentorship has a place to play across the board, and it really takes all of us in fully integrating everyone into that mentor network so that we are building the best generation to inherit the future.
I agree, and thank you, and brothers, thank you very much for your responses. Let's stick on this topic here, and I want to take it up a step further with this question. A lot of times when we look at mentoring organizations, we know many are volunteer, and if we're being very honest, a lot of them have a very feel-good approach to them, as if we're contributing something. And I'm not knocking that by any means, but you talked about preparing the next generation. And, I think back to something that the former CEO of American Express stated when he retired from American Express, and he talked about and he lamented the fact that I think after him, there was only going to be 3 African-American CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I want to look at the power of mentoring there as we think about ourselves in the positions that we're in. My question to the 3 of you, especially in your positions, in what way should we be more intentional about mentoring so that we're using it to increase the number of young people ending up in positions of influence and impact in their professional sector? How can we shift it to that intentionality as opposed to simply the feel-good volunteerism that mentoring often falls into right now?
Yeah, I think you're referring to Ken Chenault, the former CEO.
Correct.
Ken Chenault stood on the shoulders of Vernon Jordan, and both of those are men that, as a kid growing up, I wish were mentors of mine. And I had a photo of Ken Chenault on my wall. I was that kid growing up, just and aimed to one day, enter the corporate ranks. There's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. I think that it's very important to have mentors, but in corporate spaces, going beyond that, you need somebody sponsoring you and advancing your career within an organization. So as you seek these individuals that have influence, it is a mentor role, but I say pairing that with the sponsor responsibility, making sure that you find somebody who's going to advocate for you in the upper tiers of the organization that you're in. Somebody that is invested on a mentor level, but that somebody that wields that influence, can show you the doors and the levers to pull, and somebody that knows where you want to go, has a network that has been where you want to be, and is willing to make that universe of individuals available to you. And I think that that's a very key component to the mentor experience. I see them as different things. Mentors, externally play an important role. Sponsors are the inside guys, and it's essential to have them in your corner as well.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Brother Corion, what about yourself?
Yeah, just piggybacking on what Brandon was describing, I think there's another element that's really important for us as corporate executives or individuals that are able to help others that ordinarily wouldn't get that help. Okay. And I think the number one thing is we've got to be available, right? I have an acronym I use. It's called ART, right? You've got to be available, you've got to gain their respect, and you've got to gain their trust. So if you're able to sponsor, mentor individuals, and you're able to make yourself available to these people, right? And many times we all have busy calendars, but if you're not deliberate about making yourself available, if you're not deliberate about gaining their trust and their respect, then you're not really helping them. It's very important that you combine those three elements to be able to help mentor individuals. I mentor people throughout my career, and I have a handful of people of all shades that I mentor all the time. And many times, the time that they want from me, it may not be convenient for me. And so you've got to realize that in order for you to make inroads with these individuals, you have to make yourself available. It may not be convenient, but sometimes it's when they need it. And when they need it most, you've got to create that sort of environment, that sort of correlation, so that they can feel like, hey, this person is really there for me when I need them. I have their respect and I have their trust. So I think that's another element that we really have to focus on as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And before we go on to Brother Frame, Brother Webb, thank you for saying Ken Chenault. I had a total brain freeze, so I appreciate that. Because it was on the top of my mind, and you said, I was like, thank God. So I appreciate you. Brother Frame, what about yourself?
I love that acronym there, and I feel like I could give an example of what that looks like. So I mean, where I work, I am scaling up multiple businesses, right? And so in one space in August, my team was me and someone else. By Christmas, it'll be me and 20 people, right? So now I'm in a position to hire, right? And so I work in the education space. But I think what I'm talking about is applied across the board in other sectors, right? And so in terms of education, a lot of brothers, they have an opportunity when they get into education, they get pigeonholed though. They get pigeonholed to be deans, right? They get pigeonholed to behavioral positions, right? To just deal with behaviors. They don't get a chance to do assessment, deal with data, instruction, academics, right? And so I'm looking at where I'm hiring from, and I'm looking at it and saying, I know that. And so using the same acronym that was just shared, I'm hiring these brothers, and I know that I have to be available and gain their trust so that then I can mentor them, even from a position of being their manager, but also mentor them because I know that they didn't get an opportunity to develop the skills that they need to move forward in the education space, but that's across every sector where, we might have all been there where we went to get that interview and there were questions that were asked and we couldn't answer those questions because we never got an opportunity to get those experience that would allow us to actually answer the questions in the interview to denote that we have the skills to do the job. So as we're making ourselves available and gaining trust, but thinking about how, when we have the position to hire, we hire us, right? We find talented people, but also know that a lot of brothers, because of systems and a host of other things, might not have all those pieces, right? So we got to bring them in. We got to coach. We got to give them the opportunities and develop, right? And so then they're going to go a springboard. The last piece I'll use to this, two people that, and I think a mentality that we should embrace. I think about Bill Belichick and I think about Nick Saban, right? Just specifically, because if you watch college football and if you look at the NFL, right? There are coaches and throughout college football and coaches through the NFL, they studied under them, right? Even as Black men, we got to think about that same ecosystem, right? I get in a position, how am I going to bring these people and train them, right? They're going to learn under me, the tutelage all under me, right? And then they're going to go out and be killing it in all different spaces across the same industry that we're in. And I think that's a mentality that we should embrace as we're thinking about this work and mentoring.
Thank you, Brandon. And Brandon, you mentioned the dean. The funny thing is, I'm actually dean of students. I've been, and I'm in my administrative position now for about 2.5 years. But I've been an educator for 24 years on the secondary level, and I want to take it there. I think all of us brothers here are probably around the same age. So many of us are either first generation or second generation college going. I think it's safe to say that many of us are seeing, contrary to reports, data that we see that tends to like to frame us in a deficit way. But many of us are incredibly successful. I'm seeing a growing professional Black class. I'm seeing younger brothers. One of my fraternity brothers, who's actually 23, just got a $1.8 million funding for his venture capitalist funding for his startup. And you're starting to see all that. Great. But here's my concern is when I'm working with young people, I'm finding that by the time they get to senior year, there is still information about their pathway after high school that they're missing. Now, of course, when we hear this, we may think or assume, oh, we're talking about just trying to graduate. No, I'm talking about students that, unless I'm able to come across them, students that actually have 3.9s, 4.0s, that may not be getting the proper guidance, and they're going to a decent school, but they could be at an elite school, a Howard University, right? A Morehouse University, or in terms of our sisters, a Spelman on like a full 4-year scholarship, but they're missing out on that information. So this is somewhat of a two-part question here. And I want to add this other part in. I teach at, or I'm an administrator at one of the most diverse high schools in the United States. One of my observations is with other cultures is that mentorship is cultural. It is intentional. It is part of the fabric of upbringing. So my question is this. Number one, in your opinion, what do we have to do to bring more of the educated and professional class of African Americans into our school systems to do more intentional mentoring? And then the broader question is, how do we make it cultural? How do we make it to whereas mentoring a young person is just as common as your family reunion within the African American culture? I'll start with Brother Webb.
I would argue that mentoring has always been something that culturally we have done. I don't know if we've necessarily assigned the label to it and specialized in it. My mom will talk about how neighbors, took care of her and her siblings, and then, the community looked out for each other. And I think that that's something that is very much rooted in the community that I come from, and many of us come from. I think where we can get a little bit better is focusing and specializing in that mentorship. And I'll give an example when it comes to, going back. My mother made sure growing up that, I have a brother that's a physician. She made sure growing up that our physicians were physicians of color. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an aviator. She made sure that I had exposure to Black pilots, that I knew the legacy of Tuskegee Airmen. You mentioned great schools. You omitted Hampton University, but I won't hold that against you. But I think that we can do a much better job of, our alumni who are coming from those schools, our Greek networks, getting back into the public education system and giving that hand and helping up. All of us have gone into vocations that many of the kids in these schools want to go into. Kids that don't know professions that we're in. I'm a lobbyist. Kids don't know what a lobbyist is, but I make sure that I expose kids to the fact that I'm a lobbyist, that I go before Congress, that I have these relationships and networks, and try to normalize that with them, so that the only heroes, if you will, or the only successful Black people that kids in certain populations are seeing aren't necessarily just entertainment driven. So this is my very long roundabout way of saying I think we've always been mentoring as a community. That's why we are where we are at this point, and we're striving to do better. We have, the most educated group of Americans and Black women who are very service-minded and always have been. But I think that we can be more strategic about, our venture capitalists going back into schools and teaching kids about venture capital, investments, fostering the next generation of legal leaders. And that's just something that we have to become more focused on.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And just to make a quick chime in before I go to you, Brother Corion, is, what I love what you said, and the audience that's listening, is the critical importance of educating young people about the diversity of different career professions, to go beyond simply just stating doctor, lawyer, athlete, entertainer, communications, but really getting into the nuances. Because I will tell you, the young people that I work with, that I teach, That's what they're looking for. They're looking for something more nuanced. And actually, to say this, to be honest, when you have the higher level conversations with the young people, they actually listen more because they feel as though that their opinions, their thoughts, and their future is being respected, as opposed to when it's really motivational cookie cutter speeches that they often get. So I appreciate exactly what you said. Brother Corion, over to you.
Yeah, I think there's two elements to this. Just from a foundational perspective, I also agree with Brandon that in my upbringing, coming from a Caribbean family, we were always conditioned to focus on that future. What are we going to do? And I think our parents and most parents usually want their kids to do better than they did. So from a young age, we were very conditioned to excel at lots of things, including school, right? Specific subjects like mathematics, etc. So I grew up loving things like mathematics, and that's precisely why I went into engineering. But I also think that the other side to that too is not all of us is as fortunate, right? And we need to ensure that we are not just pulling a ladder up once we get there, but we're getting back down into our communities and speaking candidly to these individuals, making ourselves available to schools, making ourselves available to friends of college students. I've mentored. I remember a story where a young lady who was excelling in biology and mathematics and wasn't sure what she wanted to do. She knows she didn't want to do medicine. And now, after speaking to her and conditioning her on what are the benefits of going into engineering, she's now a bioengineer working for Johnson and Johnson. So I think we have to leverage our knowledge, our experience, and open up, to these folks that there are way more career opportunities than just the standard set that typical people see, right? So I think that's also, we have to make ourselves available, but Omani, I think it's also on the educators to reach out to us.
Right.
I remember when I worked for a company in the past, they came to our company asking us to select individuals that would go and mentor these at-risk kids at various schools. And we did it, month after month, meeting with them, a certain afternoon, giving them guidance and education on what's out there. And I think educators also have to reach back. So it's a two-way street. We've got to make ourselves available to be able to share our knowledge, but we also have to get the administrators of schools to reach into these corporations and leverage those people that can help.
Thank you for that. I agree 100%. I'll chime in on that in a second because I do want to go to Brother Frame, but you raised a very important point there. But Brother Frame, over to you. What do you think?
First, I just want to, we're friends on Facebook, so you post a lot on Facebook, so I see your stuff. You're a perfect example of what was just shared about what we need to do. But at scale, most places the dean isn't an administrator, right? And have all those different things. Like it's not a thing. So like we need to think about how we use you as you and what you do as a practice across schools and districts to get to the point of elevating brothers to spaces and sisters to spaces, so that because you're thinking about it, right? Right. Other people aren't thinking about it, right? And so I think when I think about what we need to do, it is doing that. So my previous role before where I'm in now, I created a whole pipeline program at a theme-based high school where we connected with companies and students got internships, sophomore, junior year to learn skills. And so it's really creating that type of pipeline as well as exposing them to the work of people doing the things that look like them, but also how can we prepare them with the internships, right? Because then they start to see the skills that they need, right? We know that the more skills that we acquire, the more gainfully employed we become, right? And so thinking about how we expose them to, but also really thinking about what are those skills, tactical as well as social and emotional, that you need in order to be successful, and then being intentional about the opportunity to learn about it, apply it, directly teach it and reinforce it. And then I always think about, imagine a country where that's what's happening with students. They're getting tactical skills for potential jobs, that they may be interested in, along with the social emotional development. You're talking about some amazing human beings prepared to take on the complex world that we live in.
I love that. I love that. And, just to chime in, because I'm going to ask all of you one more personal question. Because I want to get your insight on this as we begin to close this out. But it's so funny you talk. I want to go back to Brother Corion and Brother Frank, because I think this correlates here when we talk about educators. One of the things that I try to do in my position as dean of students is, I posted this on Twitter where I said, Black male educators are not correctional officers. That's what I stated, because you're right. We are oftentimes framed in that way. But what I've always tried to do is use my network, whether it be my fraternity brothers, friends, professional groups, just connections, to bring them into the school system. And I think, especially for many African-American educators, because it is on the educators, I think along with outreach to organizations, I think that we need to look at our own network and ecosystem and who we're connected to, and really ask the question, how can we bring our own network in? My sister, she's one of the higher ups at Adidas. So, I've had her come in and to speak to my students about fashion and about marketing. So, along with other people. So I think, that's the key part too, when you talk about it on the educator side. All right. I want to finish up with this. Here's the question I have. And actually, I'm going to get into, hopefully Black Enterprise does not mind here. The first part of it is, in your opinion, and to the people that's watching this, especially in their positions in corporate America, what is the best way we can get more corporate investment into mentoring programs, whether nonprofit and school-based? And then along with that, here's the last thing I want you to think about and give an opinion. Knowing what you know now, if you were back in high school, what type of mentoring program do you think you would benefit from that would have taken you even higher today than where you are? So once again, knowing where you are, knowing what you know right now, let me frame it this way. Knowing what you know right now, what type of mentoring program do you think would have been beneficial to you and your future success back then? Let's talk with Brother Frank.
I think a mentoring program that would have been beneficial for me, one that intentionally taught social and emotional skills, that provided opportunities to be exposed to people that look like me and in a variety. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, so all I knew was from my age was Ahmad Rashad and Stuart Scott, right? But now it's much more prevalent, right? But back then it was just those two, right? So I would have loved to met Black sports broadcasters, Black video game designers, right? So I think exposure, and then coupled with those social and emotional skills, again, that would have allowed me to be, bolstered the strengths that I already had that I didn't even know I had to move me farther along.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Brother Frank. Brother Corion, what about yourself?
Yeah, as I think back, my mentor through high school and even all the way through college was my father. And he helped shape sort of the direction I was going and kind of steered me off, some career paths that I'm probably glad I didn't go into now. So I think I always had that foundation in his guidance. But I think if I was to do it all over again, in addition to him, I would have probably expanded my network more. I think people have the benefit of LinkedIn today. We also, when we were going through school, we also had a lot of teachers and professors. And I remember going in and out of classes, but never really had the conversation as to sit with my outside of my counselor, sit with my professor and say, is this the right this is kind of what I'm thinking about. Is this the right direction? You know, or my engineering, and ask them the exact same question, so I can get a little bit more input into my overall, my overall guidance. I think many times today, and I see that with even my own children. I have two grown sons, and they come to me for a lot. But I've also told them, hey, you've got a network of people that you can reach out to, friends of mine, connections on LinkedIn, reach out to people you've interned with, reach out to friends, and build a coalition of individuals that you can have that conversation with and feel that you can get another view, another guidance. And I think it's important for us, as we said at the beginning, it takes a village, right? And we've got to build our networks, and we've got to build that correlation of us to be successful. And the more we include into that, the better chance we have of being successful. So I think that's what I would have done differently.
I appreciate you. And Brother Webb, to close this out.
Yeah, so many of the mentor experiences that I had coming up, mentorship experiences that I had, were focused on getting me to college. As a 2-year-old, I knew that I was going to college. I mean, there was no doubt about it. My folks weren't going to have it any other way. I think what I would have benefited from is more immersive experiences. So beyond college, linking me up with people that were in boardrooms who could share with me how to navigate corporate spaces and how to advocate for myself in corporate spaces. Being able to have time in law firms, and even having a global bend, mentorship experiences that would have broadened the lens beyond just the university experience, but the universal global experience. I wish that there was more of that available to me, because it's a big world beyond the college campus and beyond just the communities that we come from. I wish I was a little bit more armed to inherit that world and had more preparation in the mentor side of things there.
Wow, I appreciate that. And listen, I appreciate all of the panelists, and ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're watching. I hope you appreciate it too. Once again, we have Brother Brandon Frame of the Black Man Can. We have Brother Robert Corion of DELL, and Brother Brandon Webb of Amazon. And my name is Elmani S. Viney, educator at Piscataway High School. And I close out by saying something that my mentor, Stephen Pemberton, would always say. We don't get where we are by ourselves. Every single one of us gets somewhere because of help, and help from others. And so therefore, as you have gotten help from others, it is up to you and all of us to help other people, our young generation, come up as well. Thank you. Thank you to Black Excel. Thank you to Black Enterprise. Have a good day. Take care.